Derrick Anderson joins us. He is the 7th District congressional candidate here in Virginia. Derrick, we appreciate you coming on and talking with us about what we're seeing in Washington, D.C. These protests turned violent yesterday. We had a bunch of pepper spray used on protesters. We had a lot of destruction in and around the Capitol area, as well as Union Station. And you have called on your opponent, Eugene Vindman, to denounce what we saw yesterday in Washington. So walk me through your reaction to the video that we saw in Washington, D.C., and what you want to hear from our elected leaders in the days to come.
Yeah, Uriah, thank you again for having me. Look, yesterday afternoon at Union Station, we saw the American flag being taken down from the flagpole, thrown on the ground, and lit on fire. That hits hard to me. It does. It really hits hard to me, considering I've laid that flag on the coffins of over 150 service members in Arlington National Cemetery when I was with the Honor Guard. It hit hard to me thinking about when my guys were killed in Afghanistan. 5 of my guys were killed in Afghanistan, and we saw that flag laid on top of their coffins in the back of that aircraft before they got sent home. It hits hard to me. So, we wanted to make sure we were clear that that is not okay in our books, that it's not okay for American, and we want unity. We want to see our country come back together right now. And my opponent hasn't said anything about it. He's been completely quiet on it, which is unacceptable. And we've seen this. This isn't the first time. Whether it was his support of President Joe Biden, he was silent on it. We didn't see any response from him after President Biden's disastrous debate. He was silent on it. So this is what we're seeing from my opponent, is that he doesn't take a position on anything. In fact, he waits for the political headwinds to take its course, and then and only then will he say anything. People in the 7th Congressional District just want transparency. They just want to be heard and know where their elected leaders stand on things, and that's what we're trying to do. And if we continue to elect politicians to do the same old, they're going to continue to do the things that lead us to where we're at right now, where it's not affordable to live, where the cost of groceries are up 20%, where we see a border that's porous, and we see our communities unsafe. That's the kind of things that lead to where we're at right now. And so we want to see our country get back on track. We want to see our country be united. We want people to be proud to be Americans.
I've got Eugene Vindman's Twitter page pulled up here, and he is known to make statements on Twitter. And as you mentioned, he did not come out and say whether or not he wanted Biden to stay in the race. We will say that he was quick to endorse Kamala Harris, vice president, who is now the presumptive Democrat nominee for president. But looking at this page right now, in the past 24 hours, he's got an endorsement from a Foreign Policy Group of America. He has got another tweet, a thread of tweets talking about Donald Trump and how he's dangerous to the country. And again, another tweet about Project 2025 and about how it might affect Virginians. But there is no mention of what we saw, the violence that we saw in D.C. yesterday, these protests, these pro-Hamas protests that happened when President Netanyahu from Israel came to speak to Congress. You have challenged him to come out and make a statement on this. Do you think that he will? Do you expect to hear from him?
You're right. That's on him. He's got to make that determination. But I think he owes it to the people of the 7th Congressional District to let folks know where he stands on this topic. Again, we can't continue to just have politicians that kind of put their finger in the air and wait for the political headwinds to take course before they start making decisions. Mr. Vindman and his campaign, and you pulled up his Twitter, Uriah, and you can look through it time and time again. But his entire campaign is a political revenge tour against a political revenge campaign against President Donald Trump. Whereas in contrast to me and my campaign, we're focused on the things that are affecting people here in the 7th Congressional District. We're going to local businesses, and you can look up our social media and see, we were just at Almonds the other night with my mom, and we were talking to the folks there about how it's tough to get ahead right now. We're talking about the economy. We're talking and going to local businesses and seeing where it's tough for them to maintain and keep ends meet. We're talking to local sheriffs in the area and talking about how The criminal activity has increased. Fentanyl is actually affecting us very hard here in the 7th Congressional District. We saw, I talked about this just the other day with a sheriff in one of the counties in our district. And I asked him, I said, Sheriff, what's the number one thing that's affecting you all in this county? And he said, overdoses. So those are the things we're talking about. And it's easy for me because I'm from this district. This is where I grew up. I walk down the street and I run into people who have known me and my family for my entire life since I was a little guy. So, those are the things that we're hearing every single day. Those are the things we're talking about, the things that impact the people of the 7th Congressional District, because that's important.
Now, it's fair to say that President Biden and Vice President Harris did today come out and issue statements denouncing what they saw in Washington, D.C. But we've seen this type of protest turn violent ever since October 7th, when the unfortunate attacks on Israel happened. And it also brings back memories of 2020, when we saw rioting in the streets during the summer of 2020. So as people look at this video, do you think it will affect the decision they make this fall at the ballot box?
Well, I think you bring up a good point, Uriah. Even some of the most prominent Democrat leaders have come out against this, including Kamala Harris. But my opponent has been quiet, and he continues to be quiet. So yes, I do think that this is going to be one of the issues that folks are going to be making their decisions at the ballot box with. Look, we don't want violence. We don't want people to get hurt. We want our communities to be safe. We want people to peacefully protest. But I will say, and I think it's important to note that, look, I'm a biggest and staunchest supporter of the First Amendment and the right to freedom of speech. But just because you have the right to do something doesn't necessarily mean that it's right. And I think that's the problem that we're facing right now as a country, is that we're seeing a lot of those values and those morals and those things that we used to embrace. I wore the American flag on my shoulder for over 10 years over the course of 6 deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. And I was proud to wear that American flag. And I think we've lost some of that over the years.
Let me switch gears and ask you about the big news of the week, and that is President Biden stepping down and Vice President Kamala Harris stepping up and being the presumptive. I use that word because the convention, the Democrats still have a convention coming up, and so we'll have to see what happens at the end of that convention. But prior to her stepping up, and Trump has been ahead in several polls here in Virginia, and that has a lot of Republicans kind of excited about that prospect. However, that polling may not amount to much now that Harris is the candidate. So how do you think her entry into this race is going to affect the polling here in Virginia and eventually down ballot races where you are?
Yeah, one of the things that we have to remember and we have to continue to talk about is that President Biden has been the president for the last 3.5 years, right? Where we've seen inflation skyrocketing. We see the cost of goods increase. In the Commonwealth of Virginia, the average family right now is paying about $1,100 more a month just to live. That's not to go on a fancy vacation. That's not to go to a fancy dinner. That's just to live. We see a border that's completely open and porous, where we have criminal activity, fentanyl. We have loved ones here in the Commonwealth that have been killed because of that border crisis. Those are all things that the Biden-Harris presidency has resulted in. So, Vice President Harris is going to have to deal with those issues because she was the vice president during President Biden's time as president. And more importantly, she was the border czar at that time as well. So there is going to have to be some accountability there. And those are the things I think that voters in the 7th District and across the United States are going to be seeing, is that linkage between Vice President Harris and President Biden.
Derrick Anderson is he's the Republican candidate for Virginia's 7th Congressional District. Thanks so much for coming on and talking with us about this today.
Always a pleasure, Uriah. Thank you.